morning. Let me extend a very pleasant Friday morning to you, members of the media, and thank you for coming to cover another important statement made by the Oilfields Workers Trade Union. We call this press conference this morning to announce a decision that was taken by the executive of the Oilfields Workers Trade Union in respect of an industrial court judgment that was delivered with respect to negotiation for the period 2015 to 2017, OWTU and the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission for the workers covered under the bargaining units that we represent at T&TEC. First of all, we want to say that that judgment that was delivered on the 18th of February, Friday the 18th of February, did not take into account a number of factors really that continues to impact adversely the T&TEC workers whom we represent. And that judgment that was delivered that announced a 0-0-0 for the years 2015, 2016, and 2017, that judgment really was unfair to the workers who toil tirelessly, relentlessly to produce a very significant and valuable commodity that everybody benefits from. And we talk a bit about that. Because you see, people take for granted this base commodity that everybody benefits from, and most of the major establishments can boast of profitability, without which that base input, they could not have declared any profits at all. So, as if it is taken for granted what the work that those workers do collectively, all the workers who form part of the field operations, all the workers who form part of the administrative operations combined, at the end of the day, produce a reliable service that everybody benefits from. Indeed, most businesses profit from. And one only has to take a look at the various profits that continues to be declared by Republic Bank, 359 million in the first quarter, that's of last year. Ancel Roget, 935 million in profit. Massey Group, they boast about a 20% increase of profit from 263 million to 314 million. It's profits we're talking about. Guardian Holding Limited reported profits to its shareholders of some $782.33 million for the financial year 2021. And of course you have the award of contracts to friends and financiers of this government in tunes of millions of dollars. Then you have One Caribbean Media Limited, 22% increase in profit. So they're talking about a $29 million in profit. And then you have Angostura recording $153.3 million in profit. So this is the same Trinidad and Tobago where all of these profits are being declared, but it is the same Trinidad and Tobago that an award was made for a group of workers that are deemed to be essential to the economy, which economy benefits from their service that you can declare all of these profits. But that award did not take into account the inequality, the unfair nature of the construct of who benefits from the toil of who make it possible. In other words, were it not for the T&TEC workers, all of these establishments would not have been able to record the profits that they record, because it is a base high value input into all of the processes throughout the economy in Trinidad and Tobago. I want to make that point before we go further, to say that sometimes we take for granted, because it seems so seamless, that this commodity that all of us, I mean, we are talking here this morning, and we are being viewed and listened to throughout wherever the medium of the media can carry us because of this base input. You are seeing me, you're plugged in to get electricity to facilitate your cameras and so on, the nursing homes, the hospital, medical institutions and so on. Everybody depends on that base commodity for its success. And so we take for granted sometimes when you touch the switch. Even the judges at the industrial court, the court itself functions as a result of that valued input. And you take for granted when you flick the switch, you see electricity comes on. You take for granted that that happens. It does not happen. It's not the switch that causes it to come on. Workers are responsible from the generation of that commodity to the distribution of it to wherever it is being used. And that work is unlike most other in the economy, because it is dangerous work, very dangerous work, and that it is a reliable service that is provided, because gone are the days when, except in the case of the outage, and I'll talk a bit about that, except in the case of the outage that also occurred some 2 days before this judgment was given in February, on February 18th. Unlike that day, the electricity is restored almost in minutes and sometimes in seconds. And so gone are the days when you would have had to wait a whole day, a day and a night, or hours, except in cases where you would have been forewarned now because there are developmental works taking place. But gone are the days when you would have had to wait for these exorbitant times to have the restoration of electricity, because that reliable service continues to be improved over time, and that reliability is maintained by those workers. And that's the context I want to start by saying that while others, for that same period, other workers in the economy settled in higher single digits and lower double digits for that period, in the same economy, the same period of time, the court did not look at that. And the court would have made a judgment that did not reflect all which I have described. And so we want to say respectfully to the industrial court this morning that on this occasion, respectfully, you got it wrong. And that on the basis of you getting it wrong, and on the basis that we feel very strongly that it did not recognize or indeed pay due respect to the contribution of the workers, that the executive of the union would have decided that the judgment was worthy of a review by senior attorneys and so on, our panel of senior attorneys. And so when our panel of senior counsel and attorneys coming from the chamber that represent the union, would have taken a good assessment of the judgment that was delivered. They would have agreed with the executive that there are grounds, sufficient grounds, more than sufficient grounds to file an appeal, to appeal the judgment, to allow for an opportunity for fairness to prevail so that the workers will be recognized, their valued input will be recognized. And so yesterday, in the Court of Appeal, an appeal was filed against the judgment that was delivered on February 18 in the Trade Dispute 85 of 2018. Now, food prices, cost of living continues to increase. Those are the things that really escape the court in this instant, that while food prices continue to increase over the same period and continue, and while the T&TEC workers did not escape those increases, but that they continue to provide seamlessly a service, what in fact they were doing, because it costs them more to attend work and work processes and get the job done seamlessly, what in fact that was tantamount to is that they actually subsidize the provision of work, because it costs them more to sustain themselves, to produce that commodity for those who made a profit, while in fact the court told them that they will get 0-0. Something has to be wrong with that. And therefore, I'm not now only just talking about the food increased prices. We see it every day, and these increases that they talk about, captured here in the media, is not nearly all of the increases that that the entire population is faced with. And let me immediately answer a question that will be in the minds of some. Yes, the entire population is faced with increases. And of course I made the point that other increases at that time would have been higher single digit and very early double digits and so on for the same period. Everybody suffered, suffering the increase in prices. But the sacrifice made by these workers that everybody benefits from must not escape people's attention. So you have food prices continue to rise. The union goes to the court and makes out a case for the workers receiving an increase. The court says in their judgment that the workers are deserving of an increase in part of its judgment, that is capital. They agree with that. But at the same time, the court does not recognize that when it gives its award. And then the issue of the period. The period that we are talking about here is the period 2015 to 2018. So so it will go like this. January 2015, 1st January 2015 to the 31st of December 2017. So that's the period that we are talking about. Good. But that period is a period where, as I mentioned, the different awards that were given, and where the circumstance of the commission was not likened to if they argue today. So here's what. The court made an award for a period where the commission would have been had the affordability to pay an increase. And you have now the 2 successive periods going forward, and that would be 18 to 20 and 20 to 22. That's 2 periods still outstanding. And the commission would come obviously and say COVID is in that period. All employers would say COVID is in that period. And therefore, respectfully, respecting that period, it would have to be treated in terms of what occurred in that period will be taken into account. But here it is. If the court is saying that a period outside of COVID, you are going to make an award of nothing for the workers in that period, what do you expect the court or employers to say in the period of COVID? And therefore, what we can foresee going forward is that nothing for, if this is allowed to stand, nothing for workers, not only for the period that has gone, but those periods that are coming and continue. Notwithstanding the fact that workers, essential workers, T&TEC workers, continue to provide this service, as I said, and I say this word deliberately, seamlessly, where everybody benefits. So an employer only has to wait until, in his opinion, he hits hard times, and then treat with a negotiation, delay the negotiation as T&TEC did, and then go before the court at a period when his situation is different, and then cries out that he can't afford to pay because today his situation is different, notwithstanding what the situation was, and he made profits in the years gone by, the period that is before the court. And if that is allowed to stand, and they disregard the period for which the commission benefited, and speak to the current situation, we in for real problems in this country. And therefore we are saying treat with the specific period of collective bargaining with the justification of the profitability or the success of the commission for that period. The commission did not prove its case that it was there was an inability to pay. But here's what. There are a number of factors that contribute to the commission running the way it is being run right now, because they're just allowed to do as they please. And that, take for instance, the proliferation of contract labor within the T&TEC that sees the provision of the collective agreement, the contract clause, which deals with how you regulate contract labor, how you limit contract labor, that is exploited to the max. And you have established in T&TEC a parallel workforce. A parallel workforce that does not perform efficient work, which, who has to correct? Which the T&TEC workers have to correct at great cost again to who? The commission. So that too was not taken into account. So while the commission refuses to address on time the negotiations for the T&TEC workers, we took the commission to court. The commission continues, the management of T&TEC continues to increase the use of contract labor and in very technical aspect of its operations. And that when that work, shoddy work, is identified, which work can even put the public at risk, who has to correct that? Is the T&TEC workers. Now, not every yellow van, yellow truck you see running on the road, pay close attention to that, is a T&TEC vehicle or a T&TEC truck. Pay close attention. You would see some of them labeled electricity service. And then of course you would see the T&TEC trucks with the T&TEC logo. That's the T&TEC truck. But you, the public, will take for granted that all of these yellow trucks are T&TEC trucks, and you see them in the system and on the installation and so on. That is contract labor, putting both the lives of those contractor employees and so on at risk, and also the lives of the T&TEC workers at risk. And so all of those redo and so on, those work that have to be redone, cost the commission more. And while they do that, the commission continues to underemploy. So you have a deficit, some 300 linesmen short, but you make that up with a parallel workforce. And why that is so? Who benefits from that? Ask yourself who benefits from that. So if the commission has to spend more in that area, somebody benefits. And one only has to follow the money, follow the trail of the money, and you realize who gets contract after contract and so on, and who gets kicked back in the management. All of those things was not taken into account. So you have a parallel workforce in T&TEC, and that is not, it's like nobody's business. And those are issues that the union continues to complain, not just complain about, continues to raise with the various authorities. Well, of course, with the management, it's like you're complaining to Satan about sin, and then you go to take those matters to the court. The court in the past would have reprimanded the commission for the high level of contract work and so on, work that abrogate the collective agreement and so on, that you're talking about covered in the schedule of classification. But they do that because it is to the benefit of not the T&TEC workers, or not even the commission itself, but to their friends who are allotted those contracts. And then there is the issue of they not training. If they are not employing, well, they are not T&TEC, not training sufficient linesmen. They are not employing. So forget the issue about training, because they are not employed. So you have a lack of training of their linesmen while they continue with this contract, this parallel workforce. Keep your eyes on that target. About repeating that for a purpose, because I wanted to stick in the minds of the public that level of corruption that exists at T&TEC. And then there's this question of the contractor. Those same contractors and others, while the T&TEC workers are not given the material and spares to function, and sometimes they are left without proper instructions to go out. Here comes the contractor, has all of the materials and access to material and spares and so on, to do the work that the T&TEC workers should be doing in the first place. And then of course you talk about they allow their fleet to deteriorate, while that's management decision, while the contractor is allowed to flourish. And so take, for instance, the issue of the vehicles. T&TEC ordering, the DC Commission now purchased 7 new trucks and spending exorbitant amount of money to refurbish those trucks, because they were not properly outfitted to do the work that is required. And so they had was to spend money to refurbish the hydraulic system in those vehicles. So that's new. Somebody ordered that, and it was not properly outfitted. And that somebody, it's not the workers that did that. It's the management. And then they purchased some 22 new trucks again, which did not meet the specification. So those also had to be refurbished. And even after they refurbished them, it still did not meet with the proper requirement of the chassis, the strength of the chassis and so on, and the material component of those vehicles. But ask yourself why that continues to happen. People in the management has connection with people who have access to those vehicles. So you have some vehicles for sale, or you could order it from somewhere, and you could turn a big profit on it. Never mind that it does not meet the specification, but you could get your partner in the commission to bring those vehicles in. Never mind that there are a lot of work that has to be done now to bring it up to specs, which would cost the commission more, but somebody make a money on it. And it's all about the money and the corruption that is involved at the expense and the risk of workers' lives and limbs, and of course at great expense to the commission. And guess what? Nobody is disciplined or fired for that, because it runs very high and deep. And we would have complained incessantly to the board, all the board, previous board, especially the board in that period. But members of the board has connection with the suppliers. Those are facts. And that is why those things are allowed to run until it gets out of control, and where the T&TEC workers would have to rightfully say, and supported by the union, that these things are not outfitted for the task, and therefore it ought to be remedied. And thank God for the alertness of those companies. So the commission is willing to force that down the throats, the backs, the shoulders of the workers at great expense. And so all of those things make for an inefficient running of the operation, while the only constant in all of that are who? The workers who continue to work. And on top of that now, you will tell the workers that they are going to get 0, 0, 0. Well, the Office Workers Trade Union, the executive, had decided that that was unfair to the workers, and that, as I mentioned, our attorneys would have scrutinized, perused, assessed that judgment, and advised strongly, which advice we accepted, that it would be appealed. And an appeal has been filed against the judgment in respect of Trade Dispute 85 of 2018. At this juncture, I want to again publicly thank the T&TEC workers for, in spite of all of that, still continue to function, still continue to provide a service, still even after the judgment, still continue to work tirelessly, and people can still rely on a reliable service coming from those workers. What higher ideals you can find than that? And if one couldn't find a better example for that, it was at the time of the blackout. That blackout, when everybody cried out for electricity, which blackout was not caused by the T&TEC worker, which blackout was not caused by the power gen workers who generate the electricity, but which blackout was caused by the inefficiency of the management of both T&TEC and the governance arrangement with respect to T&TEC and TGU and so on, which emanated in TGU and so on. A tree fell, and that tree fell on the T&TEC lines, and those lines would have wobbled into the field of electrical field of one another and just tripped the entire system off. which the union would have advised for, as long as we could remember, to make alterations to prevent such an occurrence. And why the tree would fall and cause that? It is because that responsibility is placed in the hands of contractors to do line clearings and so on. And that of itself is not being performed efficiently, which T&TEC workers also have to go and redo. So many different aspects of the functions of T&TEC are being contracted out, and that is resulting in a number of instances where it compromises the safety of the workers and, of course, the ability of the Commission to deliver. But notwithstanding that, the workers continue to deliver. And as I was mentioning, the issue of that blackout, that the country was able to be restored, albeit in a phased basis, on the basis of having power return to the grid. The T&TEC workers were able to restore. They work tirelessly to make sure that the country receive electricity again after such a major blackout. You see, decisions taken at the level of the management most of the times affect the functioning of the particular enterprise, in this case of the Commission. And when it affects the functioning of the Commission, people do not draw the nexus with that inability, and who corrects that? Who makes it possible in spite of that? So you would not know, members of the public, unless we say it, and we continue to say it, and people don't pay enough attention to it. You would not know all of these things that are happening because you're getting electricity. When you're getting electricity, nonetheless. And I'm saying this morning on behalf of the T&TEC workers that those workers, if there's one group of workers in Trinidad and Tobago that deserve a proper adjustment on their wages, it is the T&TEC workers upon whom everybody depends. And I say that without fear of contradiction, without fear even of confrontation. A position that we are able to defend. Yeah? And again, I want to end by thanking all of those workers, the workers who work in the fields and so on, who go out right now as we speak, who work 24 hours a day. While we sleep, there is electricity. While you are awake, there is electricity. While you are sick, there is electricity. While you get well, there is electricity. That's a constant. But that electricity does not generate itself and distribute itself. It takes workers to do that. And those workers were dealt a very unfair blow with that 0, 0, 0. We are not going to accept any 0, 0, 0. Thank you very much for attending this very important statement here by the Office Workers Trade.
Mr. Roget, can you provide us with some data in terms of how many accidents would have occurred within the past couple of years at the hands of contract workers?
For yet another time, we'll do that, because I recall the union would have, on many occasions, providing that data, and yes, we would do that. We would supply you with that. Because that's an interesting point. It's not only costly, but what it does, it also put at risk those hapless workers who only want to make a daily bread, risk their lives at the hands of the ruthless contractors and those corrupt managers in T&TEC. There is corruption in T&TEC. I want to make that clear. Yeah, if you didn't get that from all that we said this morning, there's corruption in T&TEC at the level of the management of the Commission. I wanted to say that emphatically, yeah? Which we are destined to put an end to. And not until in this country, the governance arrangement with respect to who is the board. And let's ask the question, an important entity like that, who's the chairman of T&TEC as we speak? Who's the board? Is there a new board has been appointed? And when that board was appointed, when the term of the board came to an end, ask yourself those important questions.
Can you also tell us what is the ratio of contract workers versus T&TEC unionized workers?
Well, it is heading for almost a third of that, or passing a third, heading now for one half.
A third being contract workers.
Especially in those areas, because if I tell you that you have a deficit, meaning that T&TEC right now needs to have, right now, some 300 linesmen. That work is being taken up by contractors, which contractors would not necessarily put the numbers, but there's a shortage. So when you measure that in terms of the shortage that attends T&TEC operations, but the contractor takes up that by supplementing it, not with those numbers in it, but by supplementing it with contract work. So it's not a straight line. 300 missing and they have 300, but the work is taken up in contract.
But how many unionized T&TEC workers do we have right now?
You have approximately some 2,800. Yeah.
And what are the categories that you have the major deficits apart from linesmen? What other areas that we have shortages?
In the other parts of the field operations, but let me just make a point that here you have in T&TEC a situation now where even though you have these vacancies in linesmen, the commission, when they get their instructions, the political instructions to employ 1 or 2 people, they use those vacancies on the books in the establishment of the linesmen to bring in people who work in the offices. So you see what's happening there. So the commission itself wouldn't say that, listen, don't allow the politics to interfere with this operation because we need linesmen, and instead of filling those vacancies, when you fill up vacancies for a linesman, but really the warm body is a clerical worker. It has to be wrong. So in those technical areas and so on, that is not attended to. And while that is not attended to, those other areas where you have political appointees and so on, that is happening right now as we speak. So we called for, and what this should really happen in T&TEC is they should also have some sort of a commission inquiry into how T&TEC operates, how the hiring practices and so on. There was a manpower audit that was done, which manpower audit would have revealed the numbers that are required in specific areas. Not for hell would T&TEC share that with the union, but they want the union to rubber stamp the fact that there was a manpower audit. And of course we can't do that. So we would have to take them to court or go through the Freedom of Information Act to get that report, when in fact T&TEC could sit down and share that report with us. The Minister of Public Utilities would have announced publicly that T&TEC would have presented him with a business plan, which business plan the union is not privy to, don't know anything about. But T&TEC, in this arrangement, in this context that I have just described, this corrupt arrangement would have presented the minister with a business plan. And he boasts about that in public, but that business plan has not been shared with the recognized majority union to make an input, or to not just criticize, but to make a valued input as to what has been left out, what has been understated or overstated or so. But you see, we suspect very much that that business plan has core elements of who gets business with T&TEC and who profits from T&TEC, and which contractor, which entity, which supplier, and so on. That is their purpose of hiding all of this information. And we have written to that minister to meet with him, and not for heaven's sake that the minister is from one excuse to another, that minister refuses to meet with the executive of the union. You know what? We have decided that enough is enough in that regard. And if he cannot meet with the union, he will be forced to meet with all of the workers. And that is coming. Yeah?
Would you say that some of the things that has happened in Petritrin is now unfolding in T&TEC?
No, exactly. The point we're making is that these state enterprises are politically run and politically interfered with, and the management does not exercise a level of independence to say hands off. So that is facilitated, and you only have to follow the money and you will find out exactly who gets what in this situation. In the T&TEC situation, like the other state enterprises. And not until we have a type of governance arrangement where the board is allowed to exercise the independence, the management is allowed to exercise its independence, very prudent, which has to do with the running of the business and so on, void of political interference. We will continue to have this proliferation of contracts, because where contractors will benefit. Because why it is the commission has on records all of the work that has to be redone, but yet still you continue to hire these contractors. Somebody has to be benefited, and it's time all of this thing stop. Corruption continues, and let me just say, corruption did not stop when UNC went out of office. It continued under the PNM in the last term and continuing in this term. And we are destined, we are mandated, we are committed to put an end to not only the corruption, but those who commit those corrupt acts. All right? So I want to thank you very much for conveying this message loud and clear. When you see us outside on the streets, not all the time it has to do with pay increases and so on. It has to do with the inefficiency of the management, of the running of the operation. And that what the public sees is that the union and the workers protesting, but we protest after a litany of a long list of complaints and so on, which is not heeded. Taking the matter to the court, and the commission still does not listen. So we have no choice but to bring the matter to the public. And when that continues to happen, don't blame the union, don't blame the workers, blame the commission and the board and the government for the inefficient operation. But I cannot overemphasize the point that in spite of all of that, we continue to provide as if we are so selfless, to great expense to us the workers. I say us the workers because we represent it and I feel it for the workers. The workers continue to provide a reliable service that everybody benefit from. Thank you very much.
Could you give us an idea whether there is a date set for the appeal to be heard and a reminder of when the appeal was filed?
That appeal was filed yesterday, which is why we want to make this announcement this morning. And that will be set by the court. Here we have no control over that. Yes? Thank you very much. We wish you a pleasant Friday and a good weekend. And stay tuned for no announcements. Thank you very much.